Hello, this is Paul Saunders with the Center for the National Interest. Thank you for joining us today for another edition of the Three Questions podcast. I'm really excited to have a very special guest with me today, and not every guest is special. Every guest is really impressive and interesting, but not every guest is special. And my guest today, Roger Martella, is really, really special. He is the Chief Corporate Officer at GE Vernova, part of the executive leadership team at the company, the head of global government affairs and policy there, the chief sustainability officer there, really a very senior executive at GE Vernova who also has deep experience as a government official and policymaker, having been general counsel of the Environmental Protection Agency during the Bush administration. Also, earlier, principal counsel for complex litigation at the Justice Department's Natural Resources section. And he's been in a law firm, Sidley Austin, where he worked on environmental and climate issues. So, Roger, just a very deep and rich background that you have. And thank you so much for joining me today.
Paul, thank you for the honor and the invitation. It feels special to me too, because I've admired you for such a long time and your leadership at the Center for National Interest and being front and center at making sure that we can deliver policy in a way that enables us to bring speed to power, realize our full potential. So it's an honor to be here with you and thankful for your leadership.
Thank you, Roger. That's extraordinarily generous of you. So we're talking here in mid-May. We're on the eve of the first anniversary of a series of executive orders that President Donald Trump signed and announced on May 23rd in 2025. Those were to accelerate the deployment of nuclear energy. Your company, GE Vernova, you've got a really important partnership with Hitachi in Japan. Through GE Vernova Hitachi, you're actually building a small modular reactor in Canada, in Ontario. The company is also working on building a similar reactor in Tennessee and is looking at opportunities in Europe and in Asia. There are other companies that have bought the GE Vernova technology and they're applying it to designs that they'd like to build. Looking at this year that has elapsed, what difference do you think the president's executive orders have made? Looking ahead at the coming years, what would you like to see from policymakers to drive nuclear energy forward?
Well, Paul, thank you. And I think looking back with that lens a year later, we certainly see, a historic impact of the executive orders. I'd argue historically unprecedented. And we're going to talk about nuclear, but I would say it's not just true for nuclear. I think what we saw with those executive orders is how this administration is willing to tackle something in a very, across the board, interdisciplinary way to come up with new ideas. And we've seen that playbook kind of copied for other technologies too. So just the precedent of it, this was kind of the first of those examples, but just the precedent of this has really kind of shown that they're pretty serious when it comes to speed to power and being willing to start on a blank page and look at things from new lenses, which is, what I think a lot of us, regardless of politics, have argued for a long time needed to happen to meet the opportunity. But for nuclear, I say it very simply. If I were to measure the impact of these executive orders, I think they've moved the deployment of nuclear technologies, particularly small modular reactors, to the left by 5 years.
Wow,
We were looking
that's
at,
a lot.
yeah, it is a lot. It's a big deal, right? And I think if you look at the world prior to them, a lot of folks were dabbling in SMRs. We were ahead of the curve. We can probably talk about that. We were the only ones prior to the EO with a power plant under construction in the Western world, which is the one you mentioned in Canada. But we just beat it by probably a few weeks almost when we started construction. But I think the general theory in SMRs is people would kind of dabble this decade. The technologies would prove themselves early next decade. You'd see some construction, you'd start to see some deployment. And by the middle of the next decade, the 2035s or so on, you would start to see the commercialization of this. I think all that's been moved to the left by 5 years. This is no longer a middle of next decade issue. This is really a this decade issue. So if anything, it's over the next couple of years. We are going to see construction here on the SMRs. Perhaps as soon as this summer, and that's all accelerated by many years. We're going to see them producing electrons. I'd say, looking at 2030, 2031, that's many years accelerated beyond, I think, what anybody would have expected prior to the EOs. And all of that, what that's doing, it's moving to the left jobs, manufacturing, supply chain, strategic decisions, not just shovels in the ground, concrete in the ground, steel in the ground. And people are already thinking about what comes next. Like you can have like a view where you look at what the next 5 years look like, and so what's coming next after that? So it's been a complete game changer in terms of just having the impact that was intended. I think it's a 5-year impact in moving things to the left. And as I mentioned earlier, it's not just about nuclear. I think people have a high conviction now that on these energy technologies, there's a lot of creativity, there's a lot of commitment, a lot of compassion to be creative here in doing what it takes to move forward, to be competitive on these technologies that I think a lot of us have been asking for.
That's great. I mean, and I guess the second part of my question was kind of, looking ahead at the future. Is there more that you think businesses like GE that are trying to build things or investors or, the utilities that are your customers, is there more that they need from the Congress or the executive branch?
I appreciate the fact that, the collaboration with the government did not end with the issuance of the executive orders. It was quite the contrary. It was as if the administration said, we did these executive orders. Now we're going to go out there and embrace the public sector. The private sector in making sure we realize the potential. So I will share with you as one of these companies that's been very much in the details with the administration. And you may be aware that there was an announcement recently of up to $40 billion in a partnership with Japan to invest here in the United States. We know executive orders can be pretty high level and they can be pretty general, as they should be, but the devil comes in the details. And we've been, kind of editing the footnotes together over, say, the last 6 to 9 months with the government to make sure that we can execute on the intention of the executive orders. And we have felt full support and conviction. These are really hard things. No one's done this before at this scale, at this pace. A lot of unsettled questions that you got to figure out together. You can have a lot of tough conversations, and there's days you feel better about it and days you feel worse about it. But one thing that's never changed has just been, whether it's Department of Energy, Department of Commerce, the White House National Energy Dominance Council, the State Department, there's been this unrelenting conviction, like we're going to solve it. No matter how hard the issue, they've made it clear they're going to solve it. And we now have confidence that, this is going to be a tough conversation. There's some tough issues to resolve, but we have this shared commitment to resolving these issues. So we feel a lot of support there. Of course, there's more things to resolve. We're getting close to those types of details, but we do it with that high conviction that there's this shared partnership and wanting to make sure that we can solve these issues together for the near and the long term.
That's really fantastic to hear. And I guess where GE is concerned, GE Vernova, I'm sorry for correcting myself. I'm one of those people who remembers when there, when there was only one GE and now there are multiple GEs. Where GE Vernova is concerned, you seem like you have kind of a head start in important respects in nuclear. I mean, you've got a proven technology. It's a company that has a lot of experience manufacturing, also. And, this isn't to knock on any others. I think others are doing fantastic things, and there are a lot of exciting designs. And, there are other things historically that have been built. But it seems like GE is in a pretty strong position.
I would agree with what you said, both that we're appreciative of kind of we're the early mover here. We get to go first, but we're also very respectful and supportive of the other technologies that hopefully we're opening the door to come. And just a little bit of some history there. It wasn't always this way. We made a decision years ago when we bet on our BWRX 300. And the reason it's BWRX is it's because it's the 10th generation of our boiling water reactor. So this is something that's more evolutionary than revolutionary. So someone who's a nuclear engineer can look at the BWRX, they can understand it, they can figure it out. It's a more modularized, shrunk down version. It uses existing fuels. It's been very reliable all around the world. And back in the day when we decided this, there was some controversy about it. People wanted to see something more revolutionary. They wanted to see bigger risk taking and next generations of technology. And there's a role for that too. But we thought that this is what the world needed at the time. We thought we needed to prove the case for SMRs, and that would enable other technologies to come. So for a while there, people kind of challenged our decision. But now I think it's been proven true because I think the world is a little bit in a position of wanting to take less risk and move faster. So if you're talking about less risk and moving faster, we're kind of in a category of one on that. And that's why we've seen so much demand, not just in the US, but all around the world. I think we've had more than 50 countries reach out to us because when you want to move fast and you want to do it in something that's a sure thing, that is us. And we take that very seriously. We take it with a lot of humility and we take it very strategically as well in terms of how do we think about the first 20 or so reactors? How do we deploy them in partnership with the administration, with our allies all around the world so that the world gets the benefit of this in the right way. But none of that takes away for the opportunities for other technologies. And if anything, we see our role as hopefully being the proof point that opens the door to others. But we feel super optimistic too. We've got a very long runway here. We're proud of the technology. We're proud of our engineers. We're proud of our team. We're proud of our suppliers. And we're proud of our partners to see all this positive momentum.
That leads maybe to my second set of questions here. If we zoom out a little bit from nuclear to energy generally, we're in a period here over the last several weeks, largely, but not entirely connected to the war in Iran, where there's a lot of uncertainty about energy, uncertainty about energy security in the US and elsewhere. I had a really fantastic conversation several weeks ago on the podcast with Mel Idreos, who's the Secretary General of the International Gas Union, which kind of brings together I don't know, 150 or something of the world's really big natural gas companies. GE Vernova is active, obviously in natural gas. I mean, you're doing hydro, you're doing wind. If you kind of take a big step back, how do you see the company kind of contributing to energy security in the United States and in other places around the world? And I just wonder, over the last couple of months here, have there been any changes?
Paul, I'd say less changes over the last couple of months from our perspective than over the last couple of years. And I go back to that because your question goes to energy security. And I think energy security has been kind of our core base case for the existence of GE Vernova. You made a comment a couple minutes ago, which I always welcome with a lot of nostalgia, which is sometimes we can kind of confuse GE and GE Vernova. And I think the proof point we made for why there should be a GE Vernova was fundamentally based on energy security. What we saw, I think it's now been over 4 years, sadly, was with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That was the moment where the world, I think, decided it could no longer take electricity for granted. And I think we had. I certainly had, as did Europe, as did the rest of the world. And we saw for the first time, I think, in our careers, electricity being targeted as something that could be, you know, addressed there. And that was a bit of a wake up call from an energy security perspective. So it sprang Europe into action. We were very happy to kind of contribute to both electrification efforts in Ukraine and in Europe, but we've seen other issues all around the world. We've seen cybersecurity concerns, we've seen physical attacks on the grid, including in the United States. And so to us, the energy security conversation is not one that's months old. I don't think that's really changed. I think it really goes back for years. I think what we've seen with governments, this administration all around the world is they may talk about different narratives, whether that's AI or access to energy, or in the EU, they talk about security of supply. The semantics kind of change all around the world. Some focus on industrialization and things like that, onshoring of manufacturing. But to us, you got to get back to basics. And the basics is energy security. It's the bottom layer of the pyramid of everything everybody's trying to do. And that's what I think made the case for GE Vernova. I think that's why there's been so much reception to it, because the semantics do change in different parts of the world and our different markets. Even in the United States, the semantics will change based on what the priorities are. But the one thing that's the commonality is energy security. And I think we would all agree that is the core of what we need to solve for. If we can solve for energy security, we will solve for everything. And we'll look at specific use cases, specific challenges in different parts of the world, different markets. But everything we do comes back to energy security is really the driver for what we're trying to support.
this sort of touches, at least for me, on one of the reasons that I'm so fascinated by energy, in my own thinking, just that, it connects to everything. Everything that we want to do as a society, or anybody else wants to do as a society, it ultimately comes back to how much energy you have. I mean, you need it for power, you need it for agriculture, you need it for communication, you need it to defend yourself. There's kind of not a way to have a society without having actually a lot of energy. And I sort of feel like the societies that have more of it can do more, and the ones that have less of it can do less. And it seems to me like just a very fundamental thing.
It's the lifeblood of prosperity. It's the lifeblood of civilization. And it's our mission too. So, our mission as a company is to electrify the planet. We start with that, full stop. Our mission is to electrify the planet, but we also connect it to what's the impact of that. We want to electrify the planet so that people can thrive. Everybody has access to affordable, reliable, sustainable electricity so that they can have the same opportunities for prosperity and also for decarbonization long term, which is very important in our global markets, very important in lots of places in the world, lots of our markets, is we want to show we can do all of that, that electrification is the key, it's the core, it's where we start with our mission. But then we translate that into opportunities for people to prosper, to thrive, and also to meet various decarbonization goals and other sustainability goals all around the world. And we prove you can do all of that simultaneously. It's not an either or proposition.
Absolutely. So that, I think, really well sets up my third batch of questions. And we're connected on LinkedIn. So I'm always watching you, Roger, on LinkedIn, and I'm seeing you travel everywhere around the planet. It's really amazing. I don't know how one person can do it, but obviously GE Vernova, it's like a big global company, and it's necessary. But we're living in this era now, I would say, particularly over the last 10 years, where Americans, Republicans, Democrats, and frankly, leaders in lots of different parties in lots of other countries, everybody wants to make stuff at home. And some of that is economically driven, some of it is driven by security concerns. But it kind of doesn't always make sense to try to make everything at home. Sometimes, the US or others don't have the capability to do that, or it may not be really the most efficient way to do it, and it can end up costing a lot more. And in America, we increasingly have been sort of aligning around these strategic economic relationships with a lot of our allies and our close partners. That's been sort of one response to the security tensions that we face, but it still raises or leaves unaddressed at times some of the economic questions. I'm wondering, from where you sit at GE Vernova, when the company is thinking about, new manufacturing or new products where you need new things, how do you figure out where to put that? And how does kind of the United States versus, Europe or Asia or somewhere else fit into the equation?
Paul, this may be my favorite part of my job. Maybe I can't say it's the most important, but certainly my favorite. Anytime we're talking about adding factory capacity, whether in the US or globally, that to me is such a home run. And one of the things I grew up in, very industrial part of Philadelphia where I saw things go the wrong way when it came to appreciating manufacturing and industrialization. I think what has come to strike me is this is the first time in my life where I'm starting to see things go the right way when it comes to industrialization and manufacturing in these communities. And probably nothing brings me more happiness than that. And I'll just give you an example. Every Monday morning in the United States since the inauguration, we have about three dozen people punching a time card in one of our factories for the very first time in the US, being part of our manufacturing workforce. And that's just in the US. And to me, that's just, something that we should all be supportive of. In the last year, We've announced 1,800 jobs in our manufacturing and our research facilities, over $700 million investments in our supply chain just in the US alone. And I want to talk about the US, but then I want to take your point on more globally because it's just as important.
Right, right.
We're certainly seeing the need here to grow our supply chain and our factories domestically. And I'd love you to come see our factories. They're a buzz of activity. You see earth moving equipment. You see, just a hub of activity of us completely repurposing them to meet with the capacity that folks need.
That would be super fun, by
It,
the
I,
way.
it's the most fun we have. It's the most fun I have, at least,
I
is doing
bet.
that.
I
I
would
would love
love
it.
that. I would love that.
We'll make sure that happens and maybe get some video that we can share. But I
That'd be
also want to just
outstanding.
give credit too, because a lot of times it's easy to picture, someone in one of our factories building a gas turbine or a wind turbine or electrification equipment. And I love it. It's great. But I also want to just give credit to they're just part of the story. What we don't capture as well are all the trades and vocations that this is leading to. So welders and pipe fitters and plumbers and electricians, this is a new opportunity to just grow those trades and vocations and the education that goes along with them. And I'm really struck by this. Even at my own house where we're doing some construction, we're installing a heat pump system. We did a lot of research. We decided this was the way to go. They have to drill these gigantic wells. And I was watching the video from our contractor of these guys installing this state of the art heat pump system. This is like as sophisticated as it gets, and these are just like classic trades and vocations doing what they do. And I made the connection there. I'm like, I love that this is like state of the art technology, leading edge, and we have people with with this training able to come out and do it and step up and just do in that way. It just reinforced to me the importance of this vocational training, and I think the renaissance we're seeing there as well, and that's in the US, and we can share similar stories globally. While we've been wanting to serve the administration with its goals in the US, we're looking to serve Europe and the Middle East and Southeast Asia and other places in the world too, because we want to see global supply chains. I think we're proud of what we're doing in the US, but we're also proud of what we're doing globally. As you said, not everything needs to be made here, nor should it be. I think we strike that balance and we strike it well. And one thing I think that sometimes, as I've come to work with the White House and the National Energy Dominance Council, one of the things I think people sometimes misread about the president and his agenda is it has to be all US all the time. And that's actually not been the case in my experience. The administration is very much about supporting allies and partnerships and making sure we are spreading these opportunities around across the world. So I'll give you one example, going back to your example, you mentioned Japan and our relationship with Hitachi. The administration has been very clear as we partner on this $40 billion that Japan is to yield benefits from it too, and that they're going to grow their supply chain. And this is not going to be North America for North America, but how are we using Japanese suppliers? How are we creating new opportunities for training in Japan? And that's a huge part of that discussion, whether that's Saudi Arabia or Taiwan or Europe. We're seeing that be front and center in all the administration's discussions is yes, there's benefits here for the US, but if you're going to be an ally here, there's going to be a recognition that those benefits have to be translatable abroad to local jobs, domestic content, and things like that. And frankly, we're held accountable for that in making sure we're striking that balance. So I think this I go back to where I started. My favorite part of the job, every time we have a new person punch a time card in a factory or we invest to expand something or we have new earth moving equipment in because we're building an expansion or we're reconfiguring the floor because we can get more out of it. Nothing's more rewarding to me than that because that signals the investment that's going to pay dividends for decades to come, just in terms of technology and electrons, but jobs, workforce training, and just competitiveness for years to come.
I'm really glad to hear the experience with the administration that you describe, and I hope that's useful for people listening also. As I think about what I view as one of the really central challenges facing the United States, today we're in this big geopolitical competition, and as a part of that, we're leaning heavily on our allies and want them to do more in security terms. But our alliances since they're built on shared security interests, our economic interests don't always align in the same ways. And, we're kind of competing with our allies often at the same time that we're collaborating with them. So when you describe what you described related to GE Vernova Hitachi, that to me is something that's really exciting because that's a case where we're finding a way to align our economic interests, with the economic interests of our allies. And I think that that's just a key element of building the kind of international structure that we need for the United States and also our allies to succeed. I'm always gratified when I hear about things like that.
I agree. I mean, it's easy to watch the president, on TV or Truth Social, and he's going to say something at a very high level, maybe even, to shock or surprise people. But that doesn't always necessarily translate into the discussions in the room, which are infinitely more nuanced than that. And what I
Well,
find
and
is,
and to some extent, I mean, saying those things actually makes it easier from a political perspective. I'm not, I don't know why the president says or does the things that he says or does, but from a political perspective, it's kind of like only Nixon could go to China, if you know what I mean. When you stake out a position like that, you actually make it easier for yourself to collaborate.
I agree, and I just want to give credit to the folks who are like, they're clearly implementing the direction. Let there be no mistake. They know who's in charge and they know what direction has to be implemented. But at the same time, they also do it with a sense of pragmatism, which they always say the president wants to see. They're not bright line decisions, and so you may see a general direction, but you may also find that, well, here's an issue where we can partner on. Here's an issue maybe we don't have to do this in the U.S. Maybe this is part of a supply chain that we can contribute on, friendshoring and things like that. And you get into code by code and technology by technology, and you see this very pragmatic approach to multiple factor analysis of how you spread that out. So it's been impressive to watch. We don't agree 100% of the time, of course, nor should we, nor would anyone expect that. But we certainly have a respect for the process that we've seen in terms of the level of detail, the opportunity to be heard, and the collaboration here, knowing that if we come with a perspective, it's going to be given strong consideration.
That's really fascinating. And, Roger, I have to say, as I get older, I find that I don't even agree with myself 100% of the time. So it's certainly not a standard that I would try to impose on anyone. Thank you so much, Roger, for taking the time to talk today. I think this has been a really outstanding conversation. We've gotten deeply into what I at least consider to be some really important questions facing the country, and I'm so grateful for your sharing your point of view and also GE Vernova's experiences.
Paul, thank you for the opportunity. As our CEO always likes to say, we're here to serve. At the end of the day, we're here to serve our markets, our governments, our partners, our customers, our employees. So if we could be of any service to you or to anyone who might be listening to this, I hope they'll reach out.
Thank you very much. Thanks again for joining us.